Okay. Oh, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, it's conservative and.
We'll talk about political parties at some point. I think it's in the next slideshow. So one thing you might want to write down on this sheet of paper is, well, first of all, going back to the video, how did they determine left and right on the political spectrum? What was the historical event they talked about?
The French Revolution.
French Revolution, right? It's a major event in Western European history, something you learn a lot about in grade 11. So who was sitting on the left of the king? What did they want?
Change.
They wanted change, okay? And we can call them, you can put that above left, people who are progressive, right? So look at the root of that word, progress, right? And does anyone recall the people sitting on the right, what did they want? Right? They wanted things to stay the same, so conservative, right? Either they want to conserve or preserve things, keep them the same. And so as you're looking down, as you're going down through the columns and looking at how these people might respond, on the right you'll see a lot of let's keep things the same. What you'll also notice is that people who are conservative, they might also just be a little bit slower to act. Okay? So I will talk about the first one because the first point here is important to how you learn about this information in grade 11 and 12, particularly grade 12. So in terms of social conditions, the people on the left, they need change, they want change as quickly as possible. Right? That's why they called it the revolution. Right? Overnight, they wanted to get rid of the king, the monarchy, and they wanted to get rid of their political system. Okay? A political system which put most, like 98% of people, as peasants. Okay, so they're very poor, that's how they were identified, and they couldn't do anything about their situation in life. And they were going up against the king, the nobles, and the clergy, which is kind of like the church, you can understand it as. So the people on the left, they want change very quickly. They're revolutionaries. The people on the right want to maintain, right? Another word they use in grade 12 is reactionaries, right? So they react to this change that's going on, and they want things to stay the same. Right? They don't want this rapid change overnight. And you can think about that change in your own life as well. Like transitioning from your junior high to your high school might have been stressful for some of you. It's a lot of change. Some of you might have moved different schools, different cities, maybe have a new bus route as well. And that's a lot of change, and that can be very difficult to adapt to and to accommodate for, right? It can be very stressful. And so people who are conservative, it's not that, maybe the sentiment in the media is that they're evil, that they're horrible, but sometimes just temperamentally, they're slower to make changes because maybe they're more fearful of what can occur when you do things too quickly. One of the events I talked about with the morning class was, for anyone familiar with the French Revolution, there's a part of the French Revolution called the Reign of Terror. Has anyone heard of this? Some of us, a little less. What happened during the Reign of Terror?
Didn't they kill most of the nobles?
Yeah, so they started cutting off people's heads with a guillotine. So in a 1 to 3 year period, they chopped off the heads of 40,000 people. They chopped off the king's head, the queen's head, the people who were leading the revolution. Eventually they were extreme enough, their heads got chopped off. Right? They were seen as too static. Right? And so that's why these conservative, progressive people, sometimes they have concerns. Hey, we're moving things too quickly. We need to slow down. Okay, and that ties in very well. So I'll talk about tradition as well, and if there's a topic somebody wants me to discuss, have a discussion about, please let me know. But that connects to tradition as well. So people who are on the left, the progressive side, they're saying things like, well, we're not bound by tradition. We're not stuck to what our parents and grandparents were doing. We can do whatever we want. We can change things. Whereas the more conservative and right-leaning is that traditions must be respected because they provide us with stability and security. Right? And so think about it this way. Historically or traditionally, how do we understand what a family looks like?
Like a mom and a dad and a sister and a brother.
Mom, dad, kids, maybe grandparents,
Yeah, a dog.
whatever, a dog as well, right? Some people would add. Whereas nowadays, you know, what different types of family structures are we seeing?
8 people.
Right? Sure, you can have same-sex relationships, and some people will say, "Oh, that's a new family structure."
Maybe like split parents.
Could have split parents, right? Maybe you spend a weekend at mom's place, weekend at dad's place. Step parents included, step siblings as well, right? And you're making a face there. And so now the more progressive side says, well, maybe mom and dad don't have to be married as well, right? Like I know people, they have children, but they're not married, they're living together, right? And the government still steps in and says, well, you're common law, and that gets a little tricky, but you have these differing ideas of what traditions should stay the same, what can move, and that depends on, you know, how progressive or conservative you are. Okay. Does anyone have a topic we want to discuss here? Anyone have a point they want to bring up or something they found useful? Don't be shy. Here we can talk about equality as well, okay? So people who are more progressive on the left side of the political spectrum, they might also be considered socialist. They're more concerned with equality, okay? Everyone should have equality of, I would change this and say outcome even, right? Doesn't matter about what you put in, what we get out should be the same, okay? And so that can be, you know, how much money you have, and I think primarily it's done through money, right? And maybe you've heard this sentiment that, well, we should take money from people who have it and give it to people who don't, right? And so that's what a lot of the equality is like. And, you know, sometimes that can get very tricky, right? Like, how do you have perfect balance with these things? Especially with how people are treated and how they have been treated. Okay. Whereas people who are on the right, who are more conservative, who are more traditional, might say, well, everyone should have equal opportunity, right? So they would agree that, you know, historically, let's say in some countries in America, I know this is pretty bad, in Canada there was issues as well, but let's say particularly in America, white and black Americans didn't have the same opportunities. Okay, you can't see, I have a photograph of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King behind that throne there, which they covered up unfortunately. But, you know, Martin Luther King Jr., he fought and strived for equal opportunity for black Americans, that they shouldn't have to go to separate fountains, washrooms, you know, restaurants, movie theaters, sit at the back of the bus. They should have the same opportunities as everyone else. And the more traditional view is that working hard is the pathway to success. Okay. Does anyone have a topic, last call, before we move on to the different slideshow? Okay, we'll stop there.